Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
Thank you. I am really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, so today I want you to imagine a single 7-sentence text, a text that over 1 billion people repeat, at least 32 times a day.
Which is just a staggering volume of repetition when you really think about it.
Right. It's so deeply embedded in human history that entire empires have risen and fallen just interpreting it. Yet it actually contains a surprisingly intimate psychological blueprint for human growth.
It really does. It's incredibly dense with meaning.
So we are looking at chapter 1 of the Qur'an, famously known as Al-Fatihah, which translates to the opening. And our intention for this deep dive is not to deliver a theological sermon.
Right, definitely not a sermon.
We are stepping into this as explorers of a deeply influential philosophical document. We want to mine these 7 short verses to extract the practical wisdom and the life applications hidden inside them for you, the listener.
Yeah, because it is incredibly concise. But the scope of those 7 verses is just staggering.
It's essentially the anchor of the whole faith, right?
Exactly. To fully grasp the magnitude of its daily presence, you have to consider that reciting Al-Fatihah is an absolute requirement for every practicing Muslim in their obligatory prayers.
Every single prayer.
Every single one. According to the source material we are examining today, there is a traditional saying that states, no prayer is complete without the recitation of Fatihat ul-Kitab. So it is the undisputed cornerstone of the practice.
The sheer volume of human intention focused on these specific words every single day is, difficult to even visualize. And the text provides these beautiful, evocative alternate names for the chapter too.
Yeah, the alternate names really give you a clue about its function.
Because it's not just the opening. It's also called Kitab, meaning the basis of the book or the foundation. But the more poetic ones really stand out to me. Names like the treasure and the healer.
I love those titles.
Yeah.
Because they cue us into how the text is actually meant to be utilized.
Like it's a tool, not just a prologue.
Exactly. It functions as a profound synthesis. I mean, this isn't a prayer in the conventional sense of a shopping list of requests you just hand to a deity.
Right, like give me a new car, help me pass this test.
Yeah, it's not that at all. It maps out a comprehensive worldview. It establishes a very specific dynamic between human beings and the universe they inhabit.
A dynamic that, according to the sources, is based on continuous growth, profound unearned mercy, and the active pursuit of what they call a middle path.
Which we will definitely get into.
Oh, absolutely. But to understand that dynamic, we actually have to pause before we even reach the first of those 7 verses. We have to start with the phrase that precedes the chapter.
Right, the phrase that precedes practically every daily action for a practicing Muslim.
Exactly. The Bismillah.
The full phrase in Arabic is Bismillah Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, which translates to, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful.
And the source material points out that this phrase has acquired such wide and essential usage that it is literally the first thing a Muslim child is taught to learn.
The very first thing.
Yeah, and it serves as the first utterance before beginning everyday affairs. Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I am fascinated by the psychology of that kind of repetition.
It's a massive cognitive anchor.
Right. If a child learns this before anything else, and it becomes the mandatory utterance before you start a task, whether that's, writing a document, starting a meal, or walking into a high-stakes meeting, I have to wonder about the cognitive mechanism at play there.
Well, it could easily become rote, right?
Exactly. Does it just become background noise, or does it serve as an ultimate grounding mechanism? Because modern productivity gurus and psychologists, they constantly talk about setting an intention to interrupt our autopilot.
That's a great way to frame it.
This feels like an ancient, highly formalized architectural framework for exactly that. It functions as a profound cognitive interrupt. The text notes that by commencing every important affair with the Bismillah, the individual is demonstrating the proper attitude of the human mind.
In the very midst of the mundane world.
Yes, demonstrating it toward what the author calls the great mind of the universe. It is an overt acknowledgement that one should actively seek support from a source of strength vastly larger than themselves.
It binds the practical, everyday life of a human being directly to a concept of divine unity. taking the incredibly ordinary and immediately injecting it with an awareness of the extraordinary.
Which is exactly what happened at its historical inception.
Let's dig into that because it is intrinsically tied to the very first moments of the Quranic revelation.
The historical connection is vital to understanding its function. The source highlights that the revelation of the Bismillah immediately followed the very first revelation given to the Prophet Muhammad.
In the cave.
Right. If we picture the historical context, he is isolated in the cave of Hira. The first message arrives through an angel who issues a single command. Read.
A command given to a man who, historically, did not know how to read or write.
That is the crucial tension of the moment. I mean, he literally couldn't do it.
Right.
So the command is repeated, and finally the angel says, "Read in the name of your Lord who created."
Oh, wow.
The source argues that because the prophet was unlettered, his ability to read or recite was only possible with the direct assistance of the divine.
So by repeating the Bismillah before any action, every Muslim is essentially replicating that exact dynamic.
Precisely. They are mirroring that original moment in the cave. They are acknowledging their own inherent limitations and seeking external divine help to accomplish the task at hand.
And the linguistics support that mirroring perfectly.
Yeah.
The text dives into the Arabic particle ba at the very beginning of Bismillah.
Yeah, that tiny little prefix carries a lot of weight.
It really does. It doesn't translate simply to in, like doing something on account of someone. It specifically signifies by, through, or with the assistance of.
Which completely shifts the meaning.
Totally. You aren't just dedicating an action to a distant concept. You are explicitly declaring, I seek the active assistance of this specific force to get this done.
That nuance shifts the posture of the speaker from passive dedication to active reliance.
It's a huge shift.
Yeah.
But I know there's some historical friction surrounding the origin of this phrase, right?
Oh, absolutely. It is important to address that. The text mentions hostile critics, pointing specifically to a 19th century translator named Rodwell.
Okay.
And Rodwell suggested that the Bismillah was essentially plagiarized. He claimed it was borrowed from other surrounding cultures, theorizing it came from the Sabians, Zoroastrians, or perhaps a local poet named Umayyah of Tai.
The classic argument that every major religious text is just a patchwork of older local traditions.
Right, that nothing is original.
So how does the source actually dismantle that?
The refutation centers on a highly specific historical detail regarding the vocabulary within the phrase.
Okay, I'm listening.
The Bismillah introduces two attributive names, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. The source provides testimony that the Quraysh, which was the dominant, powerful tribe in Mecca at the time, were utter strangers to the name Ar-Rahman.
They didn't even know the word.
Not only were they unfamiliar with it, but they were deeply, actively averse to its usage.
Okay, and the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is the perfect case study for this, right? It's a moment of incredible geopolitical tension.
It is. This treaty occurred in the 6th year of the Hijra, after years of bitter conflict between the early Muslims and the Meccan Quraysh.
Years of war.
Exactly. When they finally sat down to draw up the truce, the Prophet instructed his scribe to begin the document with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
And what happened?
The Quraysh representative, Suhail ibn Amru, flat out refused to allow it. He demanded the scribes stop, stating, "I do not know this," and insisted they use the older common Meccan form, Bismika Allahumma.
Let me pause on that because the psychological weight of that moment is immense.
It really is.
We aren't talking about a debate over a minor grammatical preference. This was a hostile peace negotiation. Suhail ibn Amru is willing to risk the collapse of a historic truce because the vocabulary of Ar-Rahman is so alien and unacceptable to his cultural framework.
He was ready to walk away over a word.
Exactly. The source uses this to prove that if the Meccans vehemently rejected this specific term of mercy as foreign as late as 6 years after the migration to Medina, there is zero chance the Prophet just borrowed it from the local cultural ether.
It just doesn't hold up historically.
Right. It was a radically new conceptual vocabulary being forced into an environment that actively resisted it.
The introduction of those two specific words of love and mercy was a complete paradigm shift for the region.
So for anyone listening to this today, I want you to think about the practical implementation of a first word philosophy.
Yeah, how we start things.
We all have default reactions when we wake up or when an unexpected crisis hits our inbox. Usually that default is a word of stress, a heavy sigh, or a mental complaint.
A lot of heavy sighs, yeah.
Right. But what if you implemented a conscious, intentional first word practice? Before you walk into the house after a grueling commute, or before you open a difficult conversation, what specific phrase or mental intention could you use to align your mind with a broader purpose?
It's about breaking the circuit of stress.
Exactly. It doesn't require a theological commitment. It requires a psychological shift. It's about intentionally interrupting the ego's momentum, acknowledging your own limitations, and pausing to connect with a broader reality before you act.
That framing really captures the utility of the practice. It requires stepping out of the immediate stress response and anchoring yourself in a wider context.
Which brings us to the actual words anchoring that context.
Yes.
The Bismillah introduces Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. Usually these are translated into English as the beneficent and the merciful.
Right.
Now, playing devil's advocate here, if I'm reading this casually, that just sounds incredibly redundant. God is nice, and God is also very nice.
It does sound like that in English.
Why use two different words from the exact same linguistic root just to say the same thing? Doesn't that just muddy the water?
It appears redundant in English, but the source insists these are fundamentally distinct concepts, and their difference is structurally vital to the entire worldview of the text.
Okay.
Both words derive from the root rahmat, which signifies a tenderness requiring the exercise of beneficence, so it combines the ideas of both love and mercy. However, they operate on completely different timelines of human existence.
The timelines are where this gets deeply philosophical.
Yeah.
Walk us through how they differ chronologically.
Let's analyze Ar-Rahman, translated as the beneficent. The text defines this as love and mercy exercised before man even comes into existence.
Before we exist, right.
It is the manifestation of mercy in the creation of everything absolutely necessary for life without humanity having done a single thing to deserve it.
Okay, I see.
It is foundational, unearned, unconditional provision. The sun, the atmosphere, the presence of water, the cognitive capacity for thought, these are provided preemptively.
So Ar-Rahman is the grace you receive simply because you exist. You couldn't earn it even if you tried because it was given before you were capable of trying.
That is the exact mechanism. Now, contrast that with Ar-Rahim, translated as the merciful. This attribute activates strictly after man acts.
Okay.
It represents the mercy exercised when human deeds bear fruit. Crucially, the text emphasizes that Ar-Rahim signifies a being who multiplies rewards to an unlimited extent.
Unlimited.
Yes, it is the mechanism that takes a limited, finite human act of goodness and rewards it with a manifold, disproportionate outcome.
I am looking at that distinction and realizing how it shatters standard transactional logic.
It completely throws out the standard ledger.
Yeah, Ar-Rahman is the unconditional starting line, and Ar-Rahim is the wildly disproportionate finish line.
The lexicologists cited in the text agree that Ar-Rahman encompasses everything. It includes the believer and the unbeliever, humans and animals. It is universal to all creation.
It's the baseline of reality.
Right. But Ar-Rahim is particular. It focuses on the state resulting from human effort. The prophet is quoted in the source explaining it precisely this way. One is love manifested in the creation of the world, while the other is love manifested in the consequences of the deeds of men.
And the author of our source material doesn't just define these terms in a vacuum. They use them to actively debate other major religious and philosophical doctrines.
They do. It's a very active critique.
The text argues that these two specific attributes serve as a direct refutation of very prominent worldviews. Let's start with Ar-Rahman, this concept of unconditional, unearned love.
Okay.
The text claims this refutes the Christian doctrine of atonement. I want to dig into the why there.
The argument hinges on the prerequisite for grace. The doctrine of atonement, as analyzed by the source, suggests that a debt must be paid, that compensation, often in the form of a blood price or supreme sacrifice, must be exacted for humanity's inherent sins before divine grace can be fully unlocked or realized.
The scales of justice demand a payment before love can be distributed.
Yes. But the concept of Ar-Rahman fundamentally rejects that premise.
Because the love is already there.
Exactly. It posits a divine being whose greatest, most vital blessings are conferred without exacting any compensation. It argues that love and mercy, in their purest form, require no cosmic transaction and no blood price.
Humanity did not have to pay a debt to receive the sun, the earth, or the capacity to breathe.
Right. Therefore, foundational divine love is inherently non-transactional.
It's a completely different foundational premise about the nature of reality itself. It claims the universe is inherently generous, not inherently indebted.
Which is a very optimistic view.
It really is.
Yeah.
And how does the second attribute, Ar-Rahim, challenge other philosophical systems?
Ar-Rahim, the manifold reward for limited actions, is directed against doctrines like the transmigration of souls or the concept of karma found in Vedic traditions.
Okay, my understanding of karma is that it operates as a strict, unyielding cosmic ledger. You generate 1 unit of negative output, you receive 1 unit of negative consequence. You do 1 unit of good, you get 1 unit of good. It's a closed-loop accounting system.
And that is exactly what the source is critiquing. Karma dictates that progression is strictly earned through innumerable states of life in a perfectly balanced one-to-one ledger.
You earn what you get, nothing more, nothing less.
Right. But Al-Rahim destroys the concept of a balanced ledger. It describes a universe that is incredibly structurally biased in your favor.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does living under that assumption that the universe is biased in your favor actually alter human psychology?
It changes everything about how you approach risk.
Because if I believe every mistake requires an equal payment, I become risk-averse. I become terrified of failure. But if I believe that my tiny, flawed human effort will be met with disproportionate, infinite reward, it changes how I take action.
You're not paralyzed by the fear of making a wrong move?
Exactly. It teaches that divine grace isn't a minimum wage paycheck for services rendered. It's an overwhelming outpouring that dwarfs the initial action.
It creates an environment of profound psychological safety and optimism. You aren't constantly worried about balancing the scales because the system itself is designed to reward you disproportionately for even the smallest sincere effort.
Think about this in the context of human relationships and modern leadership. Whether you are running a company, managing a team, or raising children, we constantly navigate these two energies.
That's a great application.
Are you operating on the principle of Ar-Rahman? Meaning, do you provide a foundational environment of unconditional support, necessary resources, and psychological safety just because the people you lead exist in your ecosystem?
Or do you withhold it?
Right. Or do you only offer the basic tools for survival conditionally, like a strict transaction where they have to prove their worth before they get a desk or a kind word?
And similarly, when the people in your life do put in the effort, are you practicing Ar-Rahim? When they make a clumsy but sincere attempt, do you respond with disproportionate encouragement and reward to foster their growth?
Yes.
Or are you maintaining a rigid, unyielding spreadsheet of everything they owe you, ensuring they only get exactly what they mathematically earned?
Imagine building a corporate culture or a family dynamic on these two principles. You get the tools, the trust, and the safety to succeed from day one, completely unearned. That is Ar-Rahman.
Foundational support.
And when you deliver a win, the recognition and the reward far exceed the baseline expectation, that is Ar-Rahim. It shifts the entire human experience from a paradigm of scarcity and anxiety to a paradigm of abundance and growth.
That concept of continuous growth transitions us perfectly into the actual first verse of the chapter.
Right, we haven't even hit verse 1 yet.
I know. Right after the Bismillah, the text reads, "All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds." And practically every English translation of the Qur'an uses the word Lord for the Arabic word Rab.
But the author of our source text issues a very intense linguistic warning about this specific translation.
They do. They are very clear about this.
The text essentially argues that Lord is a terrible, highly restrictive translation for Rab. And honestly, I completely understand why modern readers recoil at the word Lord.
It carries immense historical and cultural baggage.
It sounds medieval. It implies a dictatorial, hierarchical relationship, like a feudal boss demanding blind submission from a peasant.
Bow down to the Lord of the Manor.
Right. If someone today is searching for a meaningful framework for their life, why should they have any interest in submitting to a lord?
That modern resistance is entirely justified based on the English connotations, which is exactly why the text deconstructs the linguistic root of Rab.
What does the root actually mean?
The author states that Lord completely fails to capture the dynamic nature of the word. The root meaning of Rab is fostering, bringing up, or nourishing.
Okay, that's already very different.
Yeah, but it is much more complex than simple feeding. It means regulating, completing, and accomplishing the evolution of things from their crudest state to their highest perfection.
I need to pause on that definition. Accomplishing the evolution of things from their crudest state to their highest perfection. That is a staggering concept.
It completely changes the relationship.
It completely removes the imagery of a king sitting static on a throne demanding worship.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it replaces that static king with a process of continuous, guided evolution. According to the text, Rab signifies the fostering of a thing in such a manner as to make it attain one condition after another until it reaches its ultimate goal of completion.
To put an analogy to this, it sounds remarkably like the mechanism of machine learning.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
In machine learning, you start with raw, unstructured, crude data. You pass it through an algorithm over countless epochs, continuously refining it, adjusting the weights, correcting the errors, until that crude data evolves into a highly accurate, perfected model.
Right, it's a process of refinement.
The algorithm isn't punishing the data when it makes an error. It's fostering it through necessary friction to achieve its highest capacity.
That is an incredibly apt modern translation of the concept. The universe, under the title of Rab, is not a static creation. It is a developmental framework.
It's an algorithm designed to refine us.
Exactly. And just as the text used the attributes of mercy to refute atonement and karma, it uses this developmental definition of Rab to explicitly dismantle the theological doctrine of the fall of man.
Let me make sure I'm framing the fall of man correctly.
Yeah.
This is the classic theological narrative that humanity began in a state of absolute perfection in a garden. Someone committed a catastrophic error. We were cast out. And now the entirety of human history is a miserable, grueling process of trying to claw our way back to grace from a state of inherent original brokenness.
That is the core of it. The belief that an original state of perfection has given place to permanent degeneration and inherent sin.
We are broken by default.
Yes. But the text argues that the name Rab points to the exact opposite conclusion about human nature. It indicates that all things in creation, including humanity, are designed to attain gradually to a state of perfection within their spheres of capacity.
Meaning you are not a fallen creature.
Exactly. You are a creature that naturally begins in a crude, raw state. Ignorance and error aren't signs of a primordial curse. They are simply the starting conditions of the crude material.
Like the raw data in the machine learning model.
Right. You are being continuously fostered, step by step, condition by condition, toward your highest potential.
The psychological shift required to accept that is massive. It completely removes the baseline assumption of inherent guilt and replaces it with a baseline assumption of vast potential. It changes the narrative of human struggle entirely.
The author adds that this evolutionary fostering isn't limited to physical or intellectual growth. The soul itself requires a daily bread of spiritual eminence.
It needs to be fed to evolve.
Yes. The text contrasts the grandeur of this evolutionary idea with other religious frameworks, arguing that the prayer of Al-Fatihah encourages the human soul to aspire to the highest possible spiritual eminence, to reach the level of prophets, the truthful, and the righteous.
Setting a very high bar.
And crucially, it encourages this aspiration without the individual being hampered by the constant fear of divine displeasure or the heavy, paralyzing burden of inherent corruption.
If we translate this into practical terms for how we navigate our own lives, think about how you frame a major failure.
Yeah, that's where this really hits home.
When you hit a wall, a career collapse, a painful divorce,
Yeah.
a massive personal mistake, the fall of man mindset whispers, you are broken. You're fundamentally flawed, and this suffering is your punishment.
It's a very heavy burden.
But if you view the universe through the lens of a fostering Rab, the narrative completely changes. What if that failure is just the crude material of your life being actively fostered?
It's just a step in the process.
What if the pain you are experiencing isn't a penalty, but the necessary algorithmic friction required to move you from your current incomplete condition to your next level of evolution?
It transforms the question from a victimized, why is this happening to me, to an empowered, what is this process fostering within me?
But that raises a massive question about accountability. If we are in this constant, messy state of evolution, from crude to perfect, we are going to make huge mistakes.
We definitely are.
We're going to harm other people in our crude state. This naturally pushes us into the third verse of the chapter, which establishes a mechanism for justice. It calls the divine the master of the day of requital. And once again, the text takes major issue with the standard English translation.
It does. English translations almost universally adopt the word king for the Arabic word malik in this verse.
Master versus king.
But the source points out a crucial linguistic, legal, and philosophical distinction. In Arabic, there are two different words derived from the same root, malik with a short I, which translates to king, and malik with a long I, which translates to master. It's just a slight vowel change.
Exactly. But the addition of that single letter gives the meaning a much greater intensity and fundamentally alters the application of justice.
I understand that a master has more authority than a king, but what is the actual functional difference between the two when we are talking about holding someone accountable for a crime?
The functional difference lies in the capacity for absolute forgiveness.
Okay, unpack that.
A king or a judge in a legal system is strictly bound by the law of the land. If someone commits a crime, the judge's mandate is to punish the guilty according to the established legal ledger.
That's their job.
Right. If a judge decides to simply let a guilty person go free because they feel compassionate that day, the judge is actually guilty of injustice. They have failed the requirements of their office.
Because their job is to balance the scales perfectly. If they waive the penalty, they are corrupting the legal system. Exactly. A master, however, is not bound by a legal ledger in the same way regarding their own property or servants, because the master is the ultimate owner of the right. They have the authority to waive that right entirely.
Oh, I see.
A master can choose to wholly forgive a servant who has wronged them without any accusation of injustice, corruption, or favoritism being leveled against them.
So, by deliberately utilizing the word with the long Amalek, master of the text is installing a safeguard.
A massive safeguard.
It is showing that the divine is not just a cosmic bureaucrat or a rigid judge forced by universal law to punish every single infraction. It is establishing that God is not guilty of injustice, if he chooses to forgive entirely. The capacity for absolute, unearned forgiveness is a feature of the system, not a bug.
It prevents the human mind from reducing the divine to a rigid enforcer of karma. And this profound understanding of forgiveness is tied directly to the second half of that phrase, master of the day of requital.
Now, when I hear phrases like day of requital or day of judgment, my mind immediately goes to apocalyptic imagery.
Oh, sure, fire and brimstone.
The end of the world, skies splitting open, oceans boiling, everyone lined up waiting for a giant gavel to drop. Sounds very final, very terrifying, and very far in the distant future.
The source material anticipates that exact misconception and addresses it through the linguistic analysis of the word yom, which is translated as day.
Okay, what does yom actually mean?
The text notes that throughout the Qur'an, the word yom is applied to any period of time whatsoever. It can signify a single fleeting moment, or it can signify an epoch of 50,000 years. It indicates an indefinitely small or indefinitely large space of time.
So a day is not a literal 24-hour solar cycle, nor does it exclusively mean the end of human history.
Correct. And the philosophical implication the author draws from this definition is striking. The source states, the divine law of requital is working every moment, and there is nothing to support the idea that it will not come into force before a particular day.
Wow.
The law of requital referred to in this verse is therefore a law which is constantly at work.
Constantly work. That fundamentally alters how you view your daily actions. You aren't waiting for a trial at the end of your life to see if your good deeds outweighed your bad.
Right, it's not a final exam.
Every action you take, every thought you harbor, has an immediate corresponding ripple effect in your own psychology, your environment, and your spiritual state. You are living inside the day of requital right this very second. The feedback loop is continuous.
It is a continuous, present-tense feedback loop, overseen not by a rigid king demanding immediate punishment, but by a fostering master capable of ultimate forgiveness.
I am looking at how we interact as a modern society, particularly online, and it seems we have completely lost this dynamic.
We definitely have.
With the rise of cancel culture and public shaming, we have essentially crowned ourselves as a society of kings with short A's. We act as rigid, unyielding judges. We see someone make a mistake or harbor a crude thought, and we feel duty-bound by social law to punish them, to excommunicate them, to destroy their livelihood.
We keep incredibly strict ledgers of everyone's worst, most unrefined moments.
We refuse to let people evolve from their crude state. But what if we adopted the posture of the master with a long A? What if we recognize that true power and true justice must include the capacity to forgive entirely, to foster growth, rather than merely enforcing a penalty?
It changes how you see the people around you.
Think about your own relationships. Are you acting as a rigid king, enforcing a strict ledger of wrongs on your spouse, your friends, or your colleagues? Or are you cultivating the capacity of a master who recognizes the crude state of the people around them and chooses to forgive in order to foster their growth?
It is a highly challenging standard to hold ourselves to, but establishing these attributes naturally forces a shift in human behavior. Because after defining the divine as an unconditional provider, a disproportionate rewarder, a continuous fosterer, and a forgiving master, the chapter abruptly pivots.
It shifts gears completely.
It moves from describing the nature of God to describing the required human response.
The fourth verse pivots sharply to, "Thee do we serve, and thee do we beseech for help." The dynamic changes entirely from passive reception to active engagement.
The source material makes a very bold comparative observation here to highlight the uniqueness of this posture. It places Al-Fatihah side by side with the Lord's Prayer from the Christian tradition to analyze a fundamental difference in how they conceptualize time, action, and the state of the world.
Okay, this is fascinating.
He also points out that the Lord's Prayer instructs the believer to pray for the coming of the kingdom of God. Thy kingdom come.
Which inherently suggests a future state. It implies that the current world is not the kingdom, and the believer is waiting for a systemic change to arrive at some later date. So how does Al-Fatihah differ from that?
According to the text, the Muslim reciting Al-Fatihah is instructed to seek for his right place in that kingdom, which is assumed to have already come.
The kingdom is already here.
Yes, there is no waiting for a future dispensation. The kingdom, governed by the attributes of mercy, fostering, and continuous requital we just discussed, is a present, inescapable reality.
So what does this all mean?
Therefore, the prayer isn't asking for the world to fundamentally change its nature in the future. It's asking for the strength, clarity, and guidance to navigate the world as it currently exists.
The psychological difference there is profound. It emphasizes a massive shift from passive waiting to active, immediate participation.
Yeah.
You aren't sitting around waiting for a savior to arrive on a white horse, or for a magical future state where the economy is perfect and your mental health is flawless.
You're dealing with what's in front of you.
You are declaring, I serve now and I seek help now. It assumes the tools for your evolution are already present in the room with you.
It demands absolute presence. It requires you to recognize that the continuous feedback loop of the requital and the active fostering of the rab are happening right now at this very millisecond.
We all fall into the trap of deferring our lives. Think about an area in your own life where you are essentially waiting for thy kingdom to come.
Waiting for the perfect conditions.
Are you putting your ambitions on hold, waiting for the perfect job market? Are you delaying your happiness until you find the perfect partner? Are you waiting for a sudden burst of motivation before you start taking care of your health? We endlessly delay action for a hypothetical, friction-free future.
Which never actually arrives.
How can you shift your mindset to match the urgency of this text? How can you stop asking for a different reality and start asking for the strength to walk the right path in the messy, crude reality you actually inhabit today?
And defining what that right path actually looks like is the exclusive focus of the final verses of the chapter.
The culmination of the whole thing.
Exactly. The text culminates in an intense plea. Guide us on the right path, the path of those upon whom thou hast bestowed favors, not those upon whom wrath is brought down, nor those who go astray.
This feels like the most heavily analyzed and potentially contentious part of the entire chapter.
It is, and the source material provides a very specific historical and theological context for how these phrases were understood by early commentators. The author notes that according to a saying attributed to the prophet, the phrase, those upon whom wrath is brought down, refers historically to the Jews.
Okay.
And the phrase, those who go astray, refers historically to the Christians.
I want to be absolutely clear and transparent here. In adherence to our principles of neutrality as guides to this text, we are reporting this strictly as the historical commentary provided by the author of our source material. We are not endorsing it, nor are we taking a theological side in ancient religious debates. We are examining an ancient text that is making specific historical and theological claims about other groups of its era.
Understood. And the author's explanation for this specific historical framing is that the text is utilizing these groups as archetypes to illustrate how human beings systematically desert the right or middle path by leaning to one of two psychological extremes.
Archetypes. That makes sense.
The source argues that the Jewish community of that specific era went to one extreme by rejecting Jesus Christ, whom the text honors as a righteous servant of God, dismissing him entirely as a liar. This extreme of rigid rejection and hatred is what the text associates with wrath.
And what is the mechanism behind the other extreme?
The other extreme, according to the source, is represented by the Christians, who went to the opposite end of the theological spectrum. Instead of rejecting the mortal messenger, they raised that same mortal Jesus to the absolute dignity of Godhead.
The opposite reaction entirely.
This extreme of excessive love, over-exaggeration, and idolatry is what the text associates with going astray. The author argues that the core function of Islam, as encapsulated in this prayer, is to inculcate the middle path, carefully avoiding the extreme of hatred that brings down divine wrath, and the extreme of excessive, blinding zealotry that leads a person astray.
That raises a really vital question for us. For a modern listener who might not share this specific Islamic theology, or who might find this historical framing of other religions uncomfortable, what is the enduring universal human insight hidden beneath this specific ancient critique?
It's a deeply psychological insight.
How does this apply to human behavior today?
This raises an important question, right? Stripped of the specific historical actors, it reveals a profound, enduring warning about the human mind's vulnerability to two highly destructive types of extremism.
Okay, let's look at the first one.
On one side, you have the extreme of rigid rejection, cynicism, and hatred. This is the psychological path of wrath. It occurs when you desert the truth or refuse to acknowledge a valid messenger or idea simply out of spite, anger, tribalism, or prejudice.
You become so deeply cynical and closed off that you actively destroy any chance for your own growth. You see this constantly in modern discourse, people rejecting objectively good ideas simply because they originated from the opposing political party.
Precisely. It is a refusal to be fostered due to arrogance or hatred.
And the other side.
On the flip side, you have the extreme of delusion or excessive zealotry. This is the psychological path of going astray. It occurs when you distort the truth because you are so overzealous, so desperately wanting to idolize something or someone that you entirely lose your grip on reality.
You just elevate it too high.
You elevate the mundane, the flawed, or the mortal to the level of the absolute and infallible.
I am looking at the current cultural landscape, and this diagnosis is painfully relevant. Just look at how we engage in politics or how we consume celebrity culture. We are constantly careening between these two exact extremes.
I really struggle to stay in the middle.
Are you falling into the extreme of wrath? Are you chronically angry, deeply cynical, immediately rejecting anyone who doesn't perfectly align with your specific ideological purity test? Because living in a state of self-righteous fury is a path that destroys your capacity for empathy and evolution.
It halts the process of the rab. It stops the fostering dead in its tracks.
Yes. And alternatively, are you falling into the extreme of going astray? Are you blindly following a charismatic political leader, an influencer, or a rigid ideology, elevating them beyond all criticism? Do you treat flawed human systems as infallible saviors?
Both paths pull you violently away from reality.
Both paths prevent the fostering process from working in your life because you are either too angry to learn or too deluded to see your own errors.
The ultimate goal, represented by this constant daily prayer repeated 32 times, is to locate and maintain the middle path, to stay balanced, to engage with the complex, crude reality of the world without falling into hateful cynicism or delusional idol worship.
And that requires a monumental amount of continuous self-awareness. It means recognizing that the middle path isn't a static destination you arrive at once and then retire. It's a continuous, dynamic balancing act in the present moment.
A balancing act that, according to the text, is impossible to maintain alone, which is why the chapter begins by seeking the help of the beneficent, the merciful, the fosterer.
Which brings this entire philosophical architecture full circle. I want you to step back and look at the sheer scale of the worldview we've just unpacked from 7 short verses. The Fatihah describes a universe that provides for you unconditionally before you ever have the capacity to act. That is Ar-Rahman.
The foundational love.
It describes a universe that rewards you boundlessly, completely out of proportion to your limited efforts when you finally do act. That is Ar-Rahim.
The disproportionate reward.
It frames your entire existence, not as a miserable punishment for a primordial fall, but as a continuous, carefully guided evolution from a crude, raw state to your highest possible perfection. That is Rahman.
The fostering process.
It promises a continuous feedback loop of justice overseen by a master capable of total, unearned forgiveness rather than a rigid king demanding blood for every error.
The master of the day of requital.
And having established all of that, it asks only one thing of you in return, that you stop waiting for a magical future kingdom to rescue you, and instead actively ask for the clarity to walk the balanced middle path right now, navigating away from the human extremes of cynical hatred and delusional zealotry.
It is a remarkably cohesive, deeply optimistic, psychological, and spiritual framework. It really challenges the way we structure our own lives and systems.
And as we consider the impact of this framework, I am struck by a thought about the modern systems we are building today. We are increasingly handing over the administration of our lives, our information, and our justice systems to algorithms and artificial intelligence.
That's a fascinating parallel.
And currently, we build these algorithms to act exactly like the rigid kings with a short a. They keep permanent, unforgiving ledgers of our data. They enforce a strict one-to-one karma of inputs and outputs. They push us toward the extremes of wrath and zealotry because that's what drives engagement.
They profit off of those extremes.
Exactly. What would happen if we challenged ourselves to build systems that mimic the master with a long A? How can we inject the concept of a forgiving, continuous fostering a rab dynamic into the technology that governs our future?
That's the big question.
How do we build digital environments that reward disproportionately and allow human beings to evolve from their crude states without permanent punishment? It is a massive challenge, but it starts with how we frame our own minds. Think about how adopting even a fraction of the Fatihah's worldview would change the way you wake up tomorrow morning. What if your first mental intention was to trust that the universe is actively fostering your growth?
It would completely change how you approached the day.
That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.